directly tied to emotions. Now, developmentally speaking, this arises in children when they start to be like, me, mine, I am that. This is my toy, right? This is my playground, my mommy, my daddy, right? So there starts to be a sense of individuation. From a neural perspective, the left hemisphere is really coming on and having a separate sense that I am that Lyon, I am a chiropractor, I have an identity, I have a practice, I am an intellectual, I'm a philosopher, I'm a healer, all these different ideas and sense of self I have about myself. Now the right hemisphere is totally different. And this is what we'll talk about at the last gift of the spine, but this is really where this comes in developmentally and based in emotion. Is this making sense? And you know, I had this great blog post. If you're not friends with me on Facebook, I always try to put up positive, meaningful, helpful stuff. There was a great nurse who wrote the 5 things that most people deal with when they're dying. This is one of the most cool things I've ever read. Basically, the first one was that they didn't work as much. Goes along, remember we said wealth, fame, and beauty? Like, in terms of real happiness, not going to happen. And most people won't realize until they get to their deathbed. The second thing was that they had meaningful relationships and they spent time with their relationships. Makes sense, right? The third I thought was awesome. It was people feeling like they didn't live their passion. They didn't live what was really inside of them because they had a sense of self that that wasn't okay, or they had to be the good wife, or the good husband, or the good banker, or the good preacher, or the good whatever to match what other people think they needed, because what we think other people want from us is all a sense of self anyway. Because one sense of self can totally shift and have no attachment whatsoever to the good or bad opinion of others and just wants to be a creative, passionate artist in the world. Because if I don't sing my song, I'm dying on the inside. Anybody know Anthony DeMello? He's a Jesuit priest from India. Oh my God, he's amazing. And he had this wonderful book of little aphorisms. And one of his things in there is, why does the bird sing? This is the question to his students. Why does the bird sing? And everybody's like, well, the bird sings. He's like, the bird sings because he has a song. Like, he has to sing. That's what he does. And so if we have the song and we don't sing it because a sense of self says, we don't do that. We don't do that. Don't be a chiropractor. Your daddy's a famous neuroscientist. You know, you should be going to an Ivy League medical school. Right? So this was my sense of self challenge, which I fought uphill until finally I broke down and had horrific pain in my thyroid, all these different problems. I realized, but wait a minute, I'm none of those things. I have a song to sing, and I'm free. It's wonderful, wonderful. That I could be a passionate artist. I didn't have to be an intellectual. In fact, I'm decidedly not an intellectual. I'm not very erudite. And I think if I'm ever speaking clearly, it's because the passion artist inside of me is speaking and connecting to hearts. So this is a healthy sense of self, and believe me, I've done it many ways that are not healthy. And I think we're all going to, as we grow, if we're on this path of continual growth, we'll continue to bump up to these different layers of a sense of self. Does that make sense? Cool. So the fourth gift is behavior. Now this is actually totally logical because the actions we take, both the Upanishads, which is one of my favorite Vedic scriptures, it's about 5,000 years old, and Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was deeply inspired by the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, basically said the same thing. So in emotion, emotion becomes a thought. The thought becomes your sense of self. Your sense of self becomes your actions. Your actions create your character. Your character creates your destiny. Very cool. So basically what we feel and what we think, who we are, the actions we take is what really creates destiny. It's really what creates character, and that's really flourishing. So now at every level here I'm functioning, I've got a healthy range of emotion, I've got a flexible sense of self, now I can take actions that moment to moment are bringing the greatest value. Now let's say I don't like the way I feel, and I don't want to be real with that emotion, and I'm working with someone. Say I work in a church, or I work in a business, or I work in an organization, and there's an anger or frustration I feel with someone, but I'm not fully with that. I don't get that this is temporary, and it's telling me to have a conversation with this person, or to go inside, do some journaling, get some clarity, pray about it, whatever our way is to get clear. And then I say, well, and I'm perceiving this person's behavior is affecting my sense of self, and I'm feeling all these emotions. So then my behavior is to send a passive-aggressive email. Right? So that action in the long run doesn't produce the biggest net good for everyone. In fact, then it creates another storm of stuff, and then we have to unwind this. I've sent caustic emails in the past, which created a lot of pain. Or they were okay emails, but they're misinterpreted because email's not a great way to express emotion. Or you just sit there for 2 hours looking at all the paragraphs and going back and rereading. Oh my God, I'm not a big email person anymore. I'm a recovering email person. So based on this sense of self, then, we tend to take actions. And our behaviors tend to be very congruent with the sense of self and the freedom we have in emotion. So the beautiful thing is as I've worked with people and their nervous system, and really this whole brain nervous system makeover thing that I do with people, is that people's behaviors can dramatically change. Think addiction. Addiction is just a behavior done over and over and over again, which ultimately is really based on a painful sense of self and painful emotions and not being able to really connect. I mean, it's a deep sense of inner disconnection, of not okayness, of not wholeness. And I think all addiction is a misguided spiritual search to try to be whole. I would argue that most addictions are a misguided attempt to be whole. So I mention this because I do retreats. Lynn and I lead retreats. And we had a gentleman who'd come to see me, I think, for a month beforehand. Really talented, brilliant young man who's very gifted in his work. And had some real substance abuse challenges and sexual addiction stuff. It's way more common than you would think in men. And one of the things that he noted after he had gone to our retreat, and done a few months of work with me, that without him really trying, those addictive tendencies just left. He no longer had the desire to go towards those substances that would alter his mood. He had a deep desire to connect with his significant other in life. It no longer was acting out sexually either with himself or others really meaningful for him, that he'd lost the urge. The urge was gone. That craving was lifted. Now, to me, what that implies is that there was a stair-step change along the way which really shifted his behavior now. And this is really cool because, again, our behavior is what ultimately creates character and destiny. If I'm continually acting with grace and dignity and compassion and love and kindness, all these things, I'm going to have a life that based on those actions will reflect patience, love, kindness, all this kind of stuff. Not acting is another way. So procrastination, not taking the actions we know we need to take because it's scary to our sense of self, or it challenges our emotions, or, oh my God, if I have to come speak in front of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, this is terrifying for me. I don't think I can do that. I can't be with that emotion of terror and nervousness. And what if they see me and they don't agree with what I say? Oh my God, that would totally challenge my sense of self. I just won't take the action. Right? So it's a two-way street. Ultimately, I think one of the greatest questions we can ask is, and I can't remember the guy who wrote the great book called Constructive Living, and I can't remember the name of the author, but he basically said, in anything, ultimately the question is, what do I do now?